Welcome, and thanks for stopping by. Whether you're watching us on YouTube or listening to our podcast on one of your favorite platforms, I'm glad you're here. At this time, I would like to thank our partners and sponsors for their dedication to helping the show to grow. We cannot do what we do without their help.
Hey everybody, you've reached the Millennium Beat with Kevin James. I'm your host, and today we have a friend that I've known for many years. He's an old-time radio jock. He's been around for a while. He knows his stuff. I'm going to be learning from him today. So his name is Bart Mazzarella. We used to call him, you still get called the Bart Man?
I do. People run into me all the time. They call me the Bart Man. Yep.
So I never really have. Oh, by the way, welcome. Thanks for joining me. I don't want to forget that. So thanks,
It's
Bart.
a pleasure to be here, Kevin.
I am looking forward to this interview. As I said, we went to the gym together, or we passed each other in the gym a lot when I was losing weight and exercising, and we talked earlier. You're still doing that. So
yeah, I've been doing it now since I was 30 years old, and I was working as a disc jockey doing a midday show at WDRC in Hartford, and the boss wanted me to go try out this fitness center. At the time, it was a Nautilus Fitness Center. And because they wanted to advertise on the station, and they wanted one of the jocks to go over there and actually be a member. So I got a free membership, and I said I might as well take advantage of it. So I realized that by going there several times a week, my body was changing. So I decided I'd keep it up. And that was at the age of 30. So that was 44 years ago.
Wow.
I'm old. I'm as old as the hills, man.
I says I'll never catch up to you. So because you're gonna live forever. So
unless I die, you can't catch up.
Being Christian says, who is that prophet? And it's like was it Enoch until he was no more. He just disappeared. He just vanished. Enoch. So it was Enoch. Yeah. So you're gonna be like that. You're gonna be all of a sudden you're gonna be here.
Elijah also. Elijah.
Well, don't they say those will be the last those two prophets coming back? They're guessing that it might be them because they never actually physically died.
In the Bible, that's true. Yes.
Yeah, in the Bible, that is true. So we've known each other for a while, and it says that we exercise, and passing each other and stuff like that. Tell me a little bit about your story of where you were born and how you get to where you are right now.
Sure. My mom was 18 years old when she got married and had 3 children like that.
Wow. 1
year apart. So I've got a brother and a sister, and I was born in Hartford, Connecticut.
Okay.
My dad was 26 when he married my mom at 18.
Okay.
And he was a World War II veteran. I was named after him. His name was Bart, and he named me Bartholomew. And so
that's what I asked you.
Bartholomew. And amazing thing is that he was in the hair business. He was the head beauty consultant.
Oh, wow.
He liked to work on women's hair. He was like a magician with that. He was also a musician who played the sax, and he played with combos, and he also played with the California Symphony Orchestra. And so he was a musician like I was throughout my life. I guess I inherited his genes. Mm-hmm. We'll get into that story a little while later.
Right.
So he passed away when I was 4 years old. He had kidney failure and passed away. And we moved from West Hartford, Connecticut, where we lived in this really big, beautiful a home with 8 bathrooms and all that because my grandmother was a very wealthy real estate tycoon, and we lived with her. But when my dad died, we no longer could live with her for whatever reason. I won't go into family issues.
Right. Yeah.
So my mom moved us into the projects for all intents and purposes. That's what it was. It was welfare, state aid housing. So I lived in the projects, and we were essentially poor. We didn't really have anything. So that's how I began my life. And at 4 years old, I realized that I lost my dad, but I really didn't have a lot of memories at that age.
Well, I think you lost more than just your dad. I mean, you lost your financial status and everything else.
Right. And the people that I grew up with in those early days really didn't have much either. I mean, it was multicultural. It was a real melting pot. I mean, we had everything from Puerto Rican people, Chinese, Japanese, of course, African American. So I was able to relate to just about anybody through that experience.
Right. That is cool.
So that was in New Britain, Connecticut, which was the hardware capital of the United States at the time. We had factories all over the place. So a lot of people in our town were just the blue collar working class people.
Okay.
And so, I didn't know what it was like to be rich. I didn't see a lot of rich people, wasn't exposed to them. And so I came from that real blue collar, hardworking background.
Right.
And I think that's where my work ethic really came from.
It came from. Well, I think a lot of reasons why you don't really, because you said your dad died when you were 4. So you don't really remember much between 0 and 4, I'm sure. So you didn't have, because you said you lived in a very nice house, stuff like that. But that was only until 4 years old. So
yeah, I don't even remember living there. The only place I remember living to begin with was in the projects.
Yeah, right. And so that's how it could have been a little bit different if you were 10 or 14, 15 years old and you lived, and had that lifestyle, and then all of a sudden you didn't have that lifestyle. So it would be a lot different. So. All right. Okay, that's interesting. I learned something new already. I didn't really know how you started. So okay. So from that point, what were your teenager years like? What were you like as a teenager?
Before we get into my teenage years, I want to tell you that my grandmother and my aunts, my dad's sisters, moved out west to California. So they lived in the Los Angeles area. After a few years of living in the projects, one of my aunts drove from California to New Britain to pick us up and take us to California. So when I was in 2nd grade, we moved out to California, and I went to 3rd and 4th grades out in California. So I was able to live in the West Coast. While we were there, my mom's boyfriend, who she left behind in New Britain, drove out to California to propose to her. They went to Las Vegas, got married. So at the age of 9, I had a stepfather.
Oh, wow.
And that really kind of shaped me and my personality, because I have to tell you that he was not a great guy. He couldn't hold a job. He had a problem with drinking and gambling and messing around on my mom, and didn't treat us well. And so I had a very unhappy childhood because he pretty much hated me.
Oh, wow.
And
he probably resented you.
I had no idea why, but it just was,
And you were young, so it's like, why should he hate you?
And why grow up with loud arguments with bad language and drinking and all that. And I just vowed I wasn't going to be like that as I grew up,
Okay. Well, yeah, I can see why now you had to go back to that. That's because that's an important part of your life. And I'm sorry that I almost missed that. So okay. So you're out in California, and then you're getting older. And now are we up to your teenager years? What's the young teenager Bart like? What was he like?
Okay, well, we'll get into that, but I want you to know that my grandmother in New Britain called my mom incessantly to come back home. So eventually, we drove back across the country and moved back to Connecticut and lived there. So I wound up going to, I think, 8 different elementary schools.
Wow.
And then as a teenager, I went to a Catholic junior high school.
Okay.
And after getting caught smoking in the boys' room in 9th grade.
So is that song written about you? Yeah, smoking in the boys' room.
Yeah, Brownsville Station did that, right?
Oh, did it? Yeah, I don't know.
I was let go, and I had to go to the secular high school, junior high. And so, I was exposed to, Catholic junior high and secular junior high. And I made friends with all these different types of people. And at the time, I was also a young budding musician, and I had a band. We were called the High Tones. So I was a guitarist, and we had a sax, a trumpet, drums. And we went out and played gigs and worked for pizza and quarters. And that's how I began my musical career.
Okay.
And those guys that I played with, we wound up playing in different bands and wound up in high school playing in the same band, which was called Detroit Soul, which is kind of interesting because there were a lot of high school dances at the time. And, all the popular kids used to get on the dance floor and go on dates and do all that stuff. And we were up on stage playing.
Right.
And I was so shy, I would stand way back. I played bass in the band.
Okay.
And I'd stand back with the drummer, and I would never go on mic because I was too shy for that.
Right.
I would never have a date because I couldn't ask a girl out for fear that she would say no.
Okay.
So I was safely on stage, away from having to ask a girl to dance, and instead I was up there watching them dancing.
Right.
And people still thought, hey, this guy must be cool because he's in a band. Right. And so I still made friends, but I was known as a pretty shy guy. Played sports in high school, baseball, and I also played some football. But mostly I was a musician. I was known for being a musician in a band. And when I was in my senior year of high school, we put out a record.
Oh, wow.
So it was called All of My Life. It was written by our keyboard player. We had a great Hammond B3 player, Peter Milano. And Peter came into practice one night and said, hey, guys, I wrote a song, and I know we need a record if we're going to be successful and famous. So we just went along with it, and we wound up going into a studio and recording it. Synchron Studios in Wallingford, and there were several albums and hits that were recorded there. And it caught the attention of a program director at a Hartford radio station, WPOP, Bob Paiva, whose brother was a guitarist for the Four Seasons for many years. And so he decided he liked the record, and he put it on the station, and then it was picked up by stations all over the country. It was and it was bubbling under the Hot 100 in Billboard magazine. So that's before I ever went to college. Okay. So we were on tour the summer after my high school graduation until I left for college. I left the band. They kept on going. I left the band because I wanted to go to school in Boston and major in radio and TV.
Okay. Yeah, at that age, you knew what you wanted to do. And looking back, you did it.
I'll tell you a quick story.
Go ahead.
When I was a senior in high school, they had a competition to send a member of each high school to the city hall and sit in the city council. So each high school sent a council member. And for some reason, and I was not a great student, believe me, D and C and an occasional B or A.
An average student.
So one of the smartest girls in school decided, Bart, we're going to run you for city council. Why? I don't know. But she wrote a speech for me.
Okay.
And this is very important. This is a turning point in my life. So
Okay.
Here I was, this shy kid, and I was asked to get up in front of the school in the auditorium behind a microphone and read this speech, why they should vote for me to be city council.
Right.
And be our school's representative. So I was so nervous. I couldn't sleep the night before, all during, the day and classes, knowing I was going to do this. I was sweating. I was nervous. And by the time it was my turn to get up behind a microphone, I was shaking so bad I could barely read the words. But when we were filing out of the auditorium and I was heading back to the classroom, my biology teacher, who only paid attention to athletes, by the way, he was the announcer at the football stadium.
Okay.
And he had this big booming voice. So he walked up to me as I was walking back to class, and he put his arm around me. And he said, "Bart, I never knew you had it in you." He said, "You sounded just like you were on the radio."
Oh, wow.
And so when the colleges came to our school, they were from all over the place. And I happened to go and talk to several of them. And one of them from Boston had a radio and TV program going. I said, "Gee, maybe I have a career in radio or TV. Maybe I'll become an actor or something." So I decided I'd go there and started working at the college radio station. And then, Kevin, one day something happened to me. This is my first year of school. They gave me a 1-hour show, and I'm playing records. Back then, we didn't have CDs.
No.
I played vinyl, and I was spinning it, and I was, doing what I thought I should be doing. And there was a bunch of students standing outside the window looking in, and they're knocking on the window. And so I got up from my chair, and I opened the door, and I said, "Can I do something for you guys? You want me to play a record or something?" They said, "No, we're just wondering what you're doing here." I said, "Well, I'm doing my 1-hour show." They says, "No, why are you not making money doing this at professional radio?" So I started getting full of myself and saying, "Gee, maybe I have something. I don't know." And so I made an audition tape, and I brought it around to stations in my hometown area in Connecticut. Now, that's a 2-hour drive from Boston.
Right.
But I got hired weekends in January of my first year of college. And every weekend I would get back to home and work Saturday 9 hours and 9 hours Sunday, making $1.67 an hour. And all I did was news at the top of the hour and weather at the bottom of the hour and played tapes. But that was my start in radio.
Oh, wow. Well, I think a lot of it is we know about radio and stuff like that is a lot has to do with personality. You had the personality for radio.
I didn't know I had a personality at all. I mean,
Well, there's a difference. It's like disc jockeying. There's a difference between a disc jockey and an engineer. There's, some people, they are the life of the party, and then the people that are the technical path of things, One thing was this good thing is they always say, like I always used to joke around and say, yeah, people always tell me I have a face for radio. But, I got to ask this question because you didn't mention about it because I looked at your bio stuff and it looks like you're married to your wife, which is a high school sweetheart. Where did so let's back up a little bit in your high school time. And when did you meet her?
Okay. Well, this goes back to my band,
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Playing on stage, I was able to stand there and watch the crowd.
Right.
And there was one girl that stood out to me. She had long blonde hair. She was really quite nice looking.
Okay.
And I noticed that she was shy, so she didn't do a lot of dancing.
Right.
But I knew the girls she was hanging with were in my class, and she was in the class below us.
Okay.
And so, a year younger.
Mm-hmm.
So one day I said to one of the girls that I knew in my class, "Hey, who is that blonde girl?" They said, "Oh, her name is Cass." I said, I think she's really beautiful. And I never went out with a girl, before this. And I said, what if I was to ask her out on a date? What do you think? She says, well, you got to ask her.
Right.
And I was kind of nervous about that. So one day in high school, we're changing classes, and I was going upstairs and she was going downstairs, and she was with that girl I was talking with, and they were walking together. And so that girl stops and says, Bart, this is Kaz. Kaz, this is Bart. And Kaz was so flustered, she didn't know what to say. So she said, I never saw you before in my life, which was a lie because she later admitted that to look at me up on stage. Okay. So later that day, I met her at the locker, and I said, hey, what are you doing Saturday night? She said, I don't have any plans. I said, well, I'd like to take you out. How about a drive-in movie?
Okay.
So she said, sure. Okay. So I picked her up, went to a drive-in movie, and at the movie, you watch the movie.
Right.
Basically, if you don't really know each other and you're really shy.
Right.
And we didn't We didn't really talk. You know, I bought her popcorn or whatever, but that was it. So I drove her home, and as I was saying goodnight, you know, you would think I'd go in for a goodnight kiss or something.
Right.
You know?
But you're shy, so I would not expect that. Yeah, because I know.
Yeah, that's right. I would do it today, but
right.
not back then.
I know what you're talking about.
So I said to her, hey, before you leave, I just want you to know something. I said, you're the type of girl I always dreamed that I would marry.
Oh, wow.
So she said, that's nice. And she got out of the car, went upstairs, and her mom said, how'd your date go? And she said, Mom, this guy's a jerk. I will never go out with him ever again.
Oh, wow.
True story.
Oh, wow.
But later on, when the record came out, we had groupies around us, and her girlfriend said, I don't know why you don't want to go out with Bart, because he's going to be famous and his record's on the radio and all this other stuff. And so the girlfriend said, Bart, why don't you ask Kaz out again? I think she's ready. So we went out again, and we went steady. Then when I left for college, I put a ring on her finger and I said, I want to get married to you. She accepted. And so a year later, we were married. So we've been married now. This year will be 55 years.
Yes, 55 years. Now, I have to ask this question. Did she really give any reason why she didn't like you on your first date? I mean, did she have anything?
Yeah, it's kind of weird for a girl in high school to be told by some stranger that she went out with for the first time that I wanted to marry her.
Oh, yeah, that would make sense. That would if you talk about marriage or kids on your first date, yeah, usually they're out the door. So, yeah, I can understand now why. I didn't know if there was anything else that she didn't really like. But
no, I mean, I was as what word am I looking for? Chivalrous,
gentleman.
I didn't go in for any moves.
Right.
You know, I didn't try anything. I didn't even try to hold her hand.
Right.
So it wasn't because of that. You know, it was because I was honest with my feelings, and you know, girls just aren't at that age.
Now you're in high school. Yeah. High school. How old were you, and how old was she at the time?
I was. I think we were both 17.
Oh, 17. Okay. The reason why anybody's listening or anything like that, I want them to relate to that. Say, I'm 17. I'm listening to this thing, and that's me too. So okay, cool. That is interesting. It's you know, and you didn't date a lot. I think, was that your first girlfriend? You said?
Yeah, I never asked another girl out to go on a date. The other guys in the band, they dated all the time.
Right.
And they had, you know, a lot of stories to tell, and I never believed their stories. I said, gee, you know, I don't think girls would agree to that, you know. And I guess I was in my own little world. Mm-hmm. And plus, we were busy in the band. I was either working at a supermarket, you know, I worked at a deli department of a supermarket, or I was at band practice or playing at a gig on weekends. So I didn't have any real time, you know. I was focused on, you know, getting things done. I had fear that I was going to be rejected, you know.
Yes, that big fear. I can relate to it. I'm a lot like you. Unfortunately, I didn't get married, so but I'm a lot like that. Question is, where in this growing up experience of your life, where was God in your situation, in your life at that time? Was he outside?
Well, I was a Roman Catholic. I made my first Holy Communion when I was 7. Went to catechism, and we never missed church. My stepdad never went to church,
right?
But my mom took us to church every Sunday. And of course, I went to Catholic school, and we learned a little bit about religion,
right?
But we really never knew about Jesus Christ. I stayed a Catholic for many, many years. I took. We had 2 sons.
Right.
Our first was born when we were both 21, and our second was born when we were 24.
Okay.
And we took them to church from their earliest ages. And we kept on going to church every Sunday, but God wasn't a real part of our lives. It was just checking a box. Like, that's what you do. If you're a family, you go to church, you check a box. And it wasn't until I was 38 years old and I left Connecticut to move to Florida. Because I didn't want to stay in an area where it was ice and cold and horrible snow and accidents with the cars. I wanted to go somewhere where it was more like a paradise. So I was done with the Northeast. And I moved to Florida, and I really didn't have a job. I thought, well, I've got so many years of experience in radio. I did television. I was a weekend sports anchor at an NBC affiliate. I was the voice of ESPN for 2.5 years on the network. I said, I've got what it takes. I can go somewhere and get a job.
Right.
I sold my house. I had a business. I sold my business, and I moved to Vero Beach.
Okay. I know that town.
And I know you do. And it wasn't long before the business that I started with a friend started costing me way too much money. We weren't all that successful. I wound up losing $250,000 in the first 8 months. And I wound up not being able to pay the mortgage on my home, which is by the ocean. And I went to the bank and said, I can't make it. You got to take the house back. They said, we won't take it back. We're not in the real estate business. So I put it up for sale, sold it like that. Got into a rental, and we were very depressed. My wife and I had never suffered a setback in all our years of marriage up till then. And some friends of ours invited us to go to a Christian church. That's not a Catholic church. And we went there, and not knowing what we were going to see or feel, heard a sermon that seemed to be talking about what was going on in our lives. Heard songs with words that were so impactful because it made me cry. I was actually there, bawling, and because I think God was speaking to my heart, speaking to my soul. And my wife said, "What did you think?" And I said, "Well, I think I want to go back." And so we kept on going back, and eventually people got to know who we were, and they knew I had a radio background, and they invited us to be on staff at a youth group, and I started going to Bible studies. Before I knew it, even though I got in my wife's business, who was a real estate agent, I was working as a real estate agent. That's where John Hamilton, the general manager of Christian FM radio, heard about me, and he was just hired from Charlotte, North Carolina, to take over the management of this new startup Christian radio station. And he said, "Bart, we need a morning man, and we would like you to be our morning man." And interestingly enough, I didn't want to go back on the radio, at least not a small radio station. I was thinking I would fly to Atlanta and do some work there and fly back to Vero and, work in a major market. And it wasn't happening. My audition tapes were rejected. They didn't know me. And even though I had all this vast experience working at some of the best radio stations in Hartford, Connecticut, and did some TV and ESPN, it didn't really matter to them. They didn't know me.
Right.
And so I was stuck not working in radio, and I was starting to make some really good money selling commercial insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Then John offered me the job, and I said to my wife, they offered me the morning show, but I don't want to do a morning show at a startup Christian radio station. That's just not me. She said, Bart, I've been praying for you to get back in radio because you're not happy in insurance. You're only happy when you're doing radio. And so I said, you mean that's an answer to prayer? And we're fairly new Christians. And I said, well, if that's what you've been praying for and this fell into our lap, who am I to reject it? I've got to follow through because that's God telling me that's where he wants me. So having no experience with contemporary Christian music and not really having ever listened to Christian radio, I dove right into it. And I did my morning show in the style that I did my secular radio up in Hartford.
Okay.
And apparently it was a good thing because we began attracting a lot of listeners that ordinarily wouldn't be, Christian radio listeners. And that grew into something very popular. And I began to be known everywhere in about a 3-county area. Indian River, Brevard, and St. Lucie County. And it was just, miraculous. It's got to be miraculous because it was a small station. And now we began attracting listeners from all over, And of course, as you know, it grew into a network, and now we're at 250 stations around the country.
The times have changed. Because that was basically early 90s, right? I think, because I was there in 95, so 94, 95. So
I began on Labor Day weekend, 1991. Yep.
91, okay. Now I was still up in Massachusetts at that time. I didn't move down here. I was visiting here. I've heard of Christian FM. I used to listen to it when I was driving back up north, or I used to go to Central Assembly, and that's right where the radio station was. So
it was then, yeah.
It was then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's because it began as a brainchild of Perry Pisani, who was a detective in the Vero Beach Police Department.
Okay.
And Perry had a vision for starting a Christian radio station and went to the pastor, Buddy Tipton, and said, Pastor, we'd like to start a radio station. They got a few people together, applied for a license, and got accepted. And they didn't really know a whole lot about what they were doing. Right. That's why eventually they hired somebody who did, and that was John Hamilton.
John Hamilton. And then John, didn't he bring along Brad?
He brought along his brother-in-law, Brad Bacon, who had worked in
PTL.
Major Charlotte Christian ministry.
Right, yeah, it was in PTL at one time, wasn't he?
Yep, that's right, PTL.
So, yeah. So he graduated from there. So
they knew what they were doing,
Right. Yeah, and John came up with the underwriting program that they have. I think they're still using it today. How they do underwriting, because it's a non-commercial license, so you can't do commercials, but you can do underwriting, and they do it. They did it really well. And,
well, it's funny because 1 year after I began working doing the morning show, and I held on to my insurance job, by the way, because they weren't offering me a whole lot of money to do the morning show. I think it was like $250 a week.
Okay.
I would get up at 3:30 in the morning and be there at 5 and be on the air from 6 to 10. And then I would put on a tie and a sports jacket, and I would go out and sell insurance. But after a year of doing both, the agent of the office called me in and said, Bart, you got to make a choice. You can't keep doing both. You got to focus your attention one way or another. And I was making thousands of dollars more in insurance than I was making working radio. So Kaz and I got together with some Christian friends of ours, did some praying. And out of that, they said, you got to give up insurance and just have faith that God is going to have your back on this. God is going to see you through it. Because if God takes you to it, he will see you through
it. Yeah.
And that was my experience, man. So what happened was, you mentioned underwriting. So John said, to make up for the difference, you could sell for the station. You go out and get underwriters. So you got to go out in the community. So at 10 o'clock every morning, I would put on my hat doing
underwriting. Yeah. Right. You take off one hat, put the other one on.
And that proved to be so vitally successful.
Oh, wow.
That 14 years later, when I decided to retire from my on-air gig, I went full-time, in underwriting.
Right.
And I made a lot more income because I was able to focus 100% of my attention on that. And the station was able to not only survive, but thrive.
Right.
And during that time, we had one fundraiser for 3 days every year. That was Carathon.
Yeah.
And we appealed to the community to call in their support. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, Kevin, the faithfulness of the listeners, they must love us a lot because they supported us with their hard-earned dollars to the extent that we were able to not just support our radio station, but a radio station in Peru.
Yes, I was thinking about that. Yes, I remember that when they used to do that, go down there.
Yeah, we went down there, what John did and Paul Tipton, and they set up the radio station. Later on, it became a TV station down there, and they reached a city of 1 million people, mostly Roman Catholic.
Oh. It's amazing what God does. We're vessels, and we can be used by Him, how He uses us. And you can see the plan that God had in your life, right? Even right from the get-go, right from the start, that God was using you, and sometimes you might have been kicking and screaming a little bit, like, I don't really want to do that, but God says, hey, I want you to do that. So you did that for a while, and then you get into underwriting. How long did you do underwriting before or are you still doing underwriting? Because are you retired?
No, Yeah, when I was 69 years old, now that's 5 years ago.
Okay.
I went to John and, let me back up just a little bit. Okay. I had wanted to retire pretty much working full-time to spend more time with my wife, who had retired when she was 62.
Okay.
And she was having some physical problems, and I wanted to take care of her.
Right.
But I really couldn't stop working because we needed, the income.
Right.
And so I was looking for someone to take my place. So there was an opportunity. One day I met this guy who moved down from New Jersey, and a friend of his who ran a Christian agency in New York City, and they were the agency that promoted Christian movies all over the country. And so he knew me because he would call me to, place ads on Christian FM for these Christian movies. So he told this guy, Joe Pellegrino, to get in touch with me when he moves to Vero because I have contacts around the town and would help him out. Well, we had lunch one day at a barbecue, 14 Bones Barbecue.
Yeah, I know that place.
And a lot of people do. Good food. And so we sat across the table, and he was telling me his story. How he was a minister who was a minister for the New York Yankees and the New York Mets, and how he had 4 newspapers and periodicals. So he was in the media,
right?
And he had moved to Vero Beach because he saw a lot of opportunities for his legacy-minded men's ministry, and he had some contacts here as well. And I said, Joe, listening to your story, you sound like the kind of guy that would do well doing what I'm doing at Christian FM. And I've been looking to retire. Would you consider taking over my position? Because I think John would love you, And he said, I'm not a radio guy. I'm not a sales guy. No, that's not where I want to go at all. I was hoping, he said, I don't even know why I'm having lunch with you because I said, why should I have lunch with this radio guy,
Right.
But as fate would have it, his friend actually steered him in the right direction. See, this is a God moment. So several months later, I got a phone call from him, and he said, Bart, remember when you told me that you think that I would be successful if I got a job at Christian FM doing what you're doing, allowing you to retire? he said, I think I might want to explore that. So we got together, talked to John. And so what we did was we worked out an arrangement where he would come on board. I would work alongside him for 6 months. At the end of 6 months, he would take over all of my accounts, which meant he could live pretty well.
Right.
I would then bow out of the picture, and that's what happened. And since then, that was 5 years ago, the station has absolutely thrived under his leadership. John elevated him to vice president of Christian FM, and he leads a sales team of underwriting development people. They call it business development.
Okay,
and they're all thriving. They're all doing incredibly well. The station has never done better, and people are supporting it like never before. Even during COVID, lockdowns and business shutdowns, we did better than ever. So that's a God thing, God led Joe Pellegrino to come to Vero to do what he's doing.
Right. Now, I guess this question, because you said he's vice president. Is Larry Bowen still president, or is there anybody else as president? Larry Bowen. Wasn't he president?
Larry is probably just on the board of directors. I don't...
Because I thought he was president back in the early 90s. Maybe not. Maybe he wasn't.
No, I don't think so. I think he was just on the board with Buddy.
Because I know John was always general manager, but I thought Larry was president. But I don't know. Again, that was early 90s. God, that was a long time ago.
I think John is president and general manager. And then John founded the network. John founded, the Christian FM network.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's a for-profit.
Right. Okay. All right. That makes sense. So, all right. I got my information, or my memory has changed. It happens after, God, it's like, it will be next year. I've been in Florida for 30 years. So it's been a while.
Tell me about it. I'll have been in Florida I have been in Florida for 36 years.
36 years. Yeah, I will actually, June 24th of 2024, I will have been living here in Florida longer than I lived in Massachusetts. Because I lived there.
I know the feeling. Same thing with my life in Connecticut. Same thing.
But I, not like you, who dislike the cold and stuff like that. I'm actually looking for property in like Tennessee or North Carolina. I will be a half and half. I live in North Carolina, Tennessee for the really warm part of the year. And then October, I'll be back here, October through April.
Sounds like a plan I can go with.
Yeah.
I like that.
So I'm doing some stuff down in Vero right now. I'm buying a 40-foot bus, and I'll be traveling and doing interviews on the road. So I'm going to I have land in Vero that I've built. We're putting a pad in, putting a pole in. We just put a new gate in the property that I'm using. And I'm going to do the same thing up in North Carolina. That way I can just go up there and just take the hot season and just chill off a little bit. Because
I've got a friend of mine who I work with at WDRC in Hartford.
Okay.
I was there for 8 years as a midday, DJ. And he was our engineer. And when he left around 1980, I think, he went to work for ESPN, which was brand new at the time.
Right.
He wound up working for ESPN for 30 years. And then he retired, and he bought a house down here in Port St. Lucie.
Okay.
When he goes back to Connecticut in the summer months, he lives in a trailer, park, and absolutely loves it. They've got great friends up there. He's got great friends down here. So I get to see him on a fairly regular basis. So we've maintained friendships ever since he handled my audition at DRC in 1975.
Okay. See, another God moment type of thing. So
absolutely.
That's pretty cool. So as you said, you retired a few years ago. What's been happening since that point? Because you still have a few years left. You're still alive. So what's been going on last couple of years?
I still get a paycheck from Christian FM.
Residual paycheck?
No. When I left, John sat me down and he said, Bart, you've been such a big part of the station from the beginning.
Okay.
That, people really relate to the name Bart Mazzarella, the Bart Man. And I want you to remain a part of the station. So I'm going to work out an arrangement so you can get a monthly check. But for that, I want you to work with the sales department. I want you to help Joe Pellegrino when he needs you, et cetera. So what I do is, because we're a nonprofit, the scripts have to be written so that they're not commercial scripts, which can get us fined by the FCC, the Federal Communication Commission. Well, since I had written thousands of scripts over the years, I was the guy that John said would be perfect for looking at all of the underwriting scripts to see whether they pass, FCC rules and regulations. So I do that. Plus, whenever we have business owners come into the station to record their own scripts, I go and I coach them and record them and produce. So therefore, I kind of earn my keep still, and I'm still a part of the station.
Okay. Now, are you doing any, and now you've done this before, because I remember being in Vero Beach and maybe at the gym or somewhere like that. I go, hey, I know that guy. Or it was on a voicemail or voice thing. And,
Message on hold. Message on hold.
Yeah. So do you do any voiceovers still or anymore?
I do. I do. As a matter of fact, for the last few years, I had been the network voice, national voice of tax saving professionals, or My Family Office, it's called. And my spots were heard even on Sirius XM on a regular basis. So, that's something that I kind of pride myself on. And I'm on various radio spots at various stations every now and then. Not as much now as I used to do.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's funny. We're talking about God moments and stuff, and very rarely do I get titles of messages before I do an interview, or sometimes while I'm editing. It has to be after the editing. I sit down and say, okay, God, what do you want to call this message? And I'm a big Marvels fan and a DC fan, and your nickname has always been the Bartman, So it's a little plur on Batman, but the title of this message is "I Am Bartman," a Bart Mazzarella interview. God gave me that, and I said that's pretty cool. I am Bartman.
Well, the last time I was on the radio doing my show, when I signed off, it was at the turn of the year from 2005 to 2006. So it was the end of 2005. It was December 30th. Okay.
Okay.
And it's the last time I was on the radio calling myself the Bart Man, right? Mm-hmm. So last week I was at Mrs. Mac's Filling Station, which is a well-known eatery here in Vero Beach.
Oh yeah, I eat there a lot every time I go. Except they're not open on Mondays, and that's a lot of times when I'm there.
They're not open on Sundays.
Oh, Sundays, but are they open on Mondays?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. It's New England Eatery that's not open on Mondays.
Right.
Because I'm usually down on there. Go ahead.
So I was having breakfast on a Saturday morning last week.
Okay.
And I'm talking to the owner, Lauren, who was at our table. I've known her since she was in junior high school because she was in our youth group, right? So we're talking to her, and I hear this woman's voice pipe up from the kitchen. I know that voice. I know that voice. So she comes running out. She says, the Bart Man. She said, I grew up listening to you. How's that?
That's amazing. You just never know who's listening and the influence you've had, your personality, your lifestyle and things that, the love of God, people look at that. I mean, that affects people. So that is a good thing,
Well, I picked up a trait from my mom. My mom was a people lover.
Right.
And you might say a people pleaser. She would do anything for people. She wanted to feed them when they came into the house and, keep on feeding them until, food was coming out of their ears. Italian mom, right? She was an Italian, great cook and all that. Mm. And wherever she went, she would be a hugger and kiss people on the cheek and just loved on people. Mm. And even though I was shy as a kid, I didn't realize that as an adult, I was a completely different person. Right. I would embrace people and get to know them and want to hear their stories and all of that. So I guess that contributed to my being popular on the radio because people felt I really cared about them. And I really did, Right. And whenever I would meet them in person, they would be so excited to meet me and all that. And I was excited that they were excited. And, because I wanted to be liked. And
I think everybody really wants to be liked. Yeah. I think everybody really wants to be liked and loved and stuff like that. But it's interesting listening to your story. And as I said, I've known you for a long time. Our lives are, I mean, there's some difference, obviously, but, a lot of your personality is like the shyness and stuff like that. I mean, I played the guitar, but not very long. I always used to say I'm a white man that can't strum. I had a hard time. Melody music, I remember taking lessons at Melody Music, and I said I had a hard time. So, but I like guitar. I like music. I've always loved music and stuff like that. And always people have told me, I don't really have the good size radio headphone. Headphones are good, but it has a microphone built in. Doesn't have that real disc jockey type of. But they always told me that, man, I had a voice for radio. So it's like, yeah, because I always do. I do my own voiceovers and stuff like that. And they say, oh, you should be in radio. I said, nah, I tried that for a couple of days. That didn't work.
Well, you have something, Kevin, it's called resonance. So resonance.
Okay.
That's
a good thing. Oh, resonance in it. Okay. I know.
Resonance.
Oh, resonance. Okay. I'm also a baritone bass. I remember being in choir with Billy McLeod, and I'm the bass, the baritone. I have a little deeper voice, and people always will hear me and they go, hey, you should be on radio. I go, well, I know the next best thing. I'm doing podcasting now, and I'm like you and like your mother. I love listening to stories. I'm engulfed in your story. That's why my tagline is encouraging the world one story at a time. God gave me that tagline. It's the Millennium Beat. It's the millennium of this time period, the millennium. And it's the beat of God, what God is doing. And that's why I interview people like yourself and other people that have interesting stories to encourage the world, that, God is still moving and God is still living today. So, and people like you are a prime example of it. So I really
look back on the tragedy of losing my business and losing my house and having to virtually start all over again. That was in 1988. And I didn't know it at the time, but God used that to bring me to a Christian church.
Right.
And to meet Christian people and then be invited to be on the youth staff at First Church of God.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Being recognized because I wound up playing guitar and leading music for the youth. John Hamilton taking notice that I was there.
Right.
And got to know me, hired me for the radio, right? So I was on youth staff for 5 years. And after that, I was asked to be in single adult ministry. So I left the youth group. My wife and I ran single adult ministry 18 through 30 at our home every Thursday night. When that was over, we were kind of like out of doing active ministry. And then the church asked me if I would get involved with doing something at the church that would bring in new people. So we started a Christian coffee house at the church called His Way Cafe.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah. Forgot about that, but yeah.
We did that for a number of years, a lot of years.
And, I've been there a few times.
Yeah, and then during that time, some friends of ours at church said, why don't we form a couples Bible study? And that was like a life group, right? We called it a life group. And we met at my house. I had a nice, beautiful home at the time, and that we sold 5 years ago when I retired. And we met there, and we had 14 people, and I was the leader. I would never see myself as a leader of something like that back when before I became a Christian.
Right.
Because I would think, who am I? What knowledge do I have? And what can God do to use me? But because God prepared me for this, He had a plan for my life. Jeremiah 29:11.
Right. Oh yeah, it's famous verse.
It is a famous verse. And I didn't realize what the plan was, but as I look back, I can connect the dots. This happened for a reason. That happened for a reason. This led me here. This connected me with that person. And then after 11 years of leading the life group, we decided that we're going to just disengage for a while because there's a lot that goes into having 14 people over once a week. preparing and the food and, all the stuff that you do.
Right.
And then I met Joe Pellegrino. I told you he was the founder and the president of Legacy Minded Men. And he started a legacy group here in Vero Beach, which I attended. But after he got involved with Christian FM, he said, Bart, I'm juggling too many things. I just can't keep leading my Legacy Minded Men's group.
Right.
I want you to take over. Would you do it? I said, sure. So I took over the group.
Roles here. You took over for you in the underwriting, and then you took over for the ministry.
Pretty amazing, right?
Yes.
So that was about, I'd say, four years ago or so.
Okay.
And we've been meeting at my house every Monday night for all those years. And we keep adding guys. Some guys leave, other people come on board, and they talk about how impactful, Legacy Minded Men ministry has been for their lives.
Wow.
And so, again, God puts us together with people who will have a major impact on our lives. All this for a reason.
Right. Well, so you're still doing that to this date. You're still doing that. Like
coming tonight. Yep.
Oh, they're coming tonight. Okay, cool. Well, I know Vero is going to be part of my home. Also, Deltona is, and then also North Carolina or Tennessee. So when I'll be down there on Monday, so I'll have to look that group up and
you're invited if you want to come. Yeah. You're invited to come.
Because I'm in Vero a lot of times on Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays. And then I only have to be back in Lake Mary because I work for a Christian Christian television station. So on Thursdays and Fridays. So, and then the rest of and then Sundays I work for a church. I run their media department. My office is part of the church. They lease me out a room, which is now a control room for the church, because we broadcast every Sunday live, and I take care of that. I run that part, and I meet up with people and stuff like that. So. But your story is awesome. I mean, we could go on forever, but you've covered up pretty good with what your life is like. In closing, what would you like to say to people that are listening that, maybe they might be struggling a little bit about what God has planned for them or something? I don't know. What do you really feel like the Lord's leading you to say in closing? I mean, it could be whatever you want. And I'll give you the floor.
When I was a young baby Christian, here I was, 38 years old. And a man at my church took me under his wing, and he said, I think you need discipleship.
Right.
So he asked me to come every Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. to his office over on the beach side.
Okay.
And for several weeks, we studied the book of John. It talks about Jesus and who Jesus really, really is. Not was, but who he is in our lives today.
Right.
That changed my perception of God and how God relates to human beings. That Jesus actually lived, and he told people who his Father God is, so that we would know.
Right.
And then the sacrifice that he made goes beyond anything any of us could ever imagine. And because of that sacrifice, we have a bridge that leads from our lives on earth to our Heavenly Father's kingdom, which is for all eternity.
Right.
And I would say to those listening that if you haven't been serious about Jesus Christ, having faith in him as a Savior, having paid your penalty that you deserve, he didn't deserve it. That is the lesson, that eternal is forever. There's no off-ramp to eternity. And the opposite of eternal life is eternal death, something that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I don't have any enemies anyway, but that follow Jesus. And if you don't know him, read the Bible, get to know Jesus on a personal basis. You can have that personal relationship. It's only through that relationship that you'll be able to breathe your last, close your eyes in this life, and open your eyes in eternity with God in heaven.
All right, let's wrap it up with there. Everybody, you've been listening to the Millennium Beat with your host, Kevin James. I've been on the computer with Bart Mazzarella. Bart, the Bart Man. Bart, thanks very much for joining me today. I appreciate it. I had a great time.
Well, thanks for asking me. It's a pleasure, Kevin. Thank you.
All right. Everybody else, tune in next week for some more interviews or some topic shows. Well, we'll see you then, and God bless.
This has been a Millennium Beat LLC production. Views and opinions of the guest are not always the views and opinions of the Millennium Beat LLC. Check us out on social media, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, and TikTok at the Millennium Beat, or on Twitter at Millennium_Beat. If you would like to partner with us to reach the world, go to our website for more information. You can go to themillenniumbeat.com or tmb2000.net. Your financial support is greatly appreciated. We couldn't do all we do without your support.
The Millennium Beat just updated our website from the ground up. Check it out at themillenniumbeat.com, or you can get there by using millenniumbeat.com or tmb2000.net, where you'll be redirected to the millenniumbeat.com's homepage. I want to thank Mass Inbound for their awesome work on our website. If you're looking for somebody to build your site, I recommend them. You can reach them at massinbound.com. That is massinbound.com. These are some of the things that you can find on our website. Homepage. You can watch our latest YouTube video or listen to our audio podcast. Also listed are some of the platforms our audio podcast is on. You'll find out when the next podcast will air and who the guest will be. On the top right, you will find two red buttons, Learn How to Help and Become a Guest. Under Learn How to Help, you can become a partner, sponsor, contributor, or contribute to the future Millennium Bus. You can give one time or monthly recurring. The choice is yours. The other button is Be a Guest. Click it, go to the form, and fill it out, and we will get back to you. We would love to hear your story. Click the About Us drop-down where you'll find stats, where we are reaching people, and to find more information on our sponsors. Click on the podcast drop-down, then click on the calendar tab where it will tell you when the shows will air and who will be on them. Or if you need to know about any meetups of the Millennium Beat staff, partners, or listeners. Also, there might be on the calendar an event at which the Millennium Beat staff will be at. Click the Guest tab for all previous guests, links to their website, social media pages, and any store they might have. Click the Forms drop-down. There you'll find a release, Be a Guest, or Become a Sponsor form.